My next guest is J.J. Greene. He describes himself as an expert in the planning, preparing, and paying for college. He's a member of the National Association of College Funding Advisors and a founding member of Ducerus, the company in which he works. And he was on my show last year at this time to talk about the beginning of the college application season. Let's get an update now that that's starting all over again. Welcome back to the show, Jay.
Hi, thank you, Steve.
So when a high school student is thinking of college and has stars in her or his eyes, a parent is thinking dollar signs. What's the first step that parents need to start taking in order to get control of this process and get the most they can?
Well, from the student side first, it's application season. So right now, the best thing the students can be doing is getting their applications out the door. We like to see families and students have all their applications submitted no later than November 15th. And in fact, the earlier the better, because the sooner they get them in, the sooner they can get some responses, and they can move on with the rest of the process. So the students should be looking to get the applications out as soon as possible right now.
Okay, that's the students. What about the parents?
Well, the parents are not so involved in the application part other than looking at those schools and figuring out what their final cost for each of those schools will be. Make sure that those are affordable and within their range.
So what forms should everybody start be gathering at this point? Are we ready for the financial aid forms yet? What stage are we at right now?
Right now, as of today, applications for students. So students' responsibility today, if I may do that first, is, like I say, applications, getting their essays done, getting all of that submitted.
To apply to a school. We're not talking about the money. We're just talking about them applying to a school.
This is for admissions.
Yeah, admissions. Okay, go ahead.
So the student needs to be focusing on selecting the schools and good fit for schools of ones that are a good mix, that academically they offer the majors and career options that they want, also schools that they do want to attend, and schools that they have a good chance of getting into. That's the student's responsibility. So schools that they're picking for the right reasons, not because of the football team.
Yeah, or the party aspect of the school.
Right.
Or the fact that their friends go there or something like that. Let's get right to paying for this thing. This is a financial show. We want to nail that down. What are the next steps? You mentioned parents knowing what the full cost of the annual tuition is and so on of a university. What else should they be doing?
Well, that's the toughest part. Most families see only that retail sticker price out there. It's called the COA, cost of attendance. And that's when they see this school is showing a $20,000 price tag. This one's $30,000, this one's $40,000,
right.
This one's $60,000. That is not the price that most of them are going to pay. It's a retail sticker price. You and I both know none of us pay retail.
Yeah.
So what they need to know is actually called their EFC, which is their expected family contribution.
How does that work, and why is that delineated from the list price?
Because that is the amount of money that the federal government and the schools decide a family can afford to spend on an annual basis for education. And that's the most important number. A family must know what their minimum contribution will be towards that sticker.
The amount that's going to come out of their pocket towards tuition.
Exactly, the minimum amount.
Minimum amount, okay. How do they find out what their EFC is?
Well, the easiest way for them to do so is to go online and Google EFC. They'll come out with 250,000 websites. If they just stick to the first 5 on the first page, they'll get finaid.org, Department of Education, FAFSA, etc. And in there, they can go in and it's a scaled-down model of the financial aid EFC formula, but they'll enter just income, assets, how many parents, how many kids will be in school at the same time, and they'll put that information in, they'll hit submit, and they will be shocked by the number, but it will be higher than what they think they can afford annually based on their income because it does not include expenses.
So as a starting place, at least it's going to be lower than tuition, but it's going to be probably a high number to begin with. What's the next step for them?
Well, once they know that, then they need to make sure that there's nothing included in that formula that is unnecessarily increasing their expected contribution. In other words, certain income and assets are exempt from the formula, kind of like we do tax planning with our accountants. Same thing we can do here. There's certain areas that we get punished for if we haven't done properly.
Many individuals have been saving for college through these 529 plans. Take us through the effect of a 529 plan on either this EFC or the financial aid one can expect to get.
Well, the positive aspects of the 529 plan are that any gains within the plan are exempt from taxes if used for college expenses. So that's the upside. But unfortunately, it's considered a parental asset. So when they look at income and assets, any money that's in a 529 plan for all of your children is still weighted against you in the formula as a parental asset, and parental assets are weighted against us at 5.64% for financial aid purposes, like any other asset, once we're above the asset protection allowance.
So if you have a 529, while the product itself may have attractive characteristics, when it comes to getting a loan, it might work against you. What would be some of the ways to avoid or to, in effect, do something else other than a 529 to get a better effect?
Well, it won't count against you if you don't mind as far as getting loans. Loans are easy.
Okay.
It'll count against some families that qualify for need-based aid.
I see.
So if it's in the formula, they're going to have you use the money in your 529s before they'll give you that need-based aid that you might otherwise qualify for. And that's the same with all of your assets.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest areas that families miss out on or do not understand is that children's assets are weighted more heavily than any other asset in the financial aid formula. And a lot of parents or grandparents had set up UTMAs and UGMAs and other children's accounts that are weighted against us at 20 to 25 cents on the dollar in the financial aid formula. So in a perfect world, when a family is applying for financial aid, which is in January of the student's senior year of high school, and then every January, we want to have as little money in our student's name as possible. Every place else, it's weighted less.
You're a founding member of Ducerus. What is Ducerus, and what do you do to help people work through these issues?
Our Ducerus offices nationally, what we do is we know the process inside and out. And our job here, one of the functions, is to make sure that we minimize out-of-pocket costs and increase the opportunity for free grants and scholarships to lower a family's cost of college. And that's one of the areas specifically that we work on. We work on many, but that's one, is to make college more affordable and to make sure we're not being punished by having saved improperly or in the wrong places.
Getting back to student loans here, you mentioned in a few articles the mistakes that people can make on their FAFSA enrollment form. And can you take a moment to describe some of those?
Yes, because one simple mistake on either the FAFSA, which is the federal formula, or the federal form that goes to every school in the country, and then for the private schools, the top 390 or so use a profile, which is more in-depth financial analysis. Make sure you spend your resources before theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some simple mistakes that every family makes that cost them potentially a lot of money in financial aid. Number one, any qualified or non-qualified retirement accounts, your IRAs, your 401ks, when they ask you for your investments, do not include those. If you include those, they're part of the formula. But our retirement accounts, both qualified and non-qualified, are exempt from financial aid formulas.
Mm-hmm.
That's a simple mistake. On the federal formula, the FAFSA, our primary property, the house we live in, the equity in that property is not to be included. If you include that equity, again, it will artificially raise your expected family contribution and may cost you free money that you could receive in government grants.
So these are complicated forms. I don't know if any of my listeners have actually tried to fill one out. I have, and I think I know a lot about finances and a lot about forms like this, but it was a struggle for me to get through the FAFSA. I can see how easy it would be to make a mistake. Would you agree with that?
Over 80% of the families that fill them out make errors on them that are costly. And the CPAs do not want to touch them anymore because it is such a landmine.
Mm-hmm.
But it is something they are designed for us to fail. And even when you said you filled yours out, Steve,
mm-hmm.
if you remember when you read them, the questions are being directed to your student, not to the parent. On all these forms, they think your student is filling these out.
Well, that's insane.
We as parents and CPAs don't know how to fill them out.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely
So you
insane.
must do these with your students. And if you don't mind, on this profile, they ask your student how much can your parents afford to pay.
Yeah.
And your student's going to put in a higher number than you can or than you want because they think the schools are not going to take them if they can't afford to go. So there's some absurd questions on there. You need to fill them out as parents, and you need to go through them very much with a fine-tooth comb.
One last question, again, from the parents' point of view. They want to know what your taxes are during a given year, and yet many of us do not file our taxes in time. We extend our taxes and so on. How do you deal with that aspect of it?
I'm a business owner like you are. Mine were filed a few days ago.
Yeah.
So we understand that. And a lot of families miss out on aid because they think they have to have them done. Aid is offered on a first-come, first-served basis. All of your forms need to be filed in January. There's a box when it asks about your income tax return that you click on, and it's a drop-down. It will say your taxes, will file, have filed, or not going to file. So when you're doing them in January, you click will file. They now know that everything else you're giving them is an estimate. But when you submit that FAFSA in January, it has a time and date stamp on it. I just got a tax return from one of my doctors yesterday. I will now finish his FAFSA for last year by going in and putting have filed, and now the IRS can upload the tax return. But his date for financial aid was still last January. He was in the front of the line.
Assuming then, of course, that the government was in operation, of course. Yeah, so it's a completely different story. J.J. Greene, my guest, expert in planning, preparing, and paying for college. Jay, if someone wants to get in touch with Ducerus online, what's the website?
www.ducerus.com.
How do you spell Ducerus?
Ducerus. And on there you'll find our offices around the country, and you can contact the local branch.
All right. Thank you, Jay. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Steve.